Welcome back to Central News. On the 5th of May, Professor Shaun Holt spoke in a public forum about complementary therapies to fight breast cancer. Katrina caught up with Shaun earlier in the week to find out how these therapies play a significant role alongside conventional treatments.
Well, they're very important, and just about every patient with cancer will look at complementary and alternative and natural therapies, and the vast majority will actually use them as well. So it's really important, and it's very understandable. If I had cancer, I'd want to do everything I possibly could to maximise my chances of beating the disease, maximise my chances of a higher quality of life. So patients, just about everyone will look at them, and rightly so in my opinion. But the problem is getting good quality information. That's the real issue.
What are these complementary therapies?
There are thousands of complementary therapies, and every time I give a talk, some people in the crowd will tell me about others I've never even heard of, even though I spend most of my career looking at these things. So there are thousands. Obviously we can't go through all of them, but a good way to think of it is there's 5 different types. So the first type is alternative medical systems, such as homeopathy or Ayurvedic Indian medicine, things that are totally different to the way we understand medicine. The second is mind-body therapies, using the power of the mind, like relaxation or yoga. The third would be physical therapies, where something is actually done to the body, manipulation or pressure on some part of the body. The fourth you'll be most familiar with, that is vitamins, supplements, minerals, herbs, diets, where you take a product. And finally we have energy therapies, or in some cases pretend energy therapies that aren't there.
So are there some therapies that don't work or perhaps don't help the situation?
Oh, of course. And even the most stringent advocate of the natural approach would agree that not everything works. So, and it's actually quite small. So around 5% of therapies have been shown to be beneficial. Now that sounds a very low number, and it is. But when you look at the fact that there's hundreds of therapies, 5% of hundreds means there's actually 3 or 4 dozen that are worth using and worth knowing about. The problem for the consumer or the patient or even the health professional is, how do you know which of those are? Because the hidden, I call it a sea of nonsense. There's a lot of nonsense out there, unfortunately, with some real good ones hidden in the middle. So how do you know? Well, research. The research tells us which ones work and which don't.
So how are medical professionals about these complementary therapies?
Well, it's very interesting. Health professionals, well, doctors and particularly and pharmacists, are not trained in this. So when I graduated 12 years ago, I had no training whatsoever. The only reason I hope I know a little bit about this is because I spend my whole time looking at the research papers and writing books and lecturing on the subject. A recent graduate from medical school, she'd had half a day in 5 years of training, so they don't know. But what's good is they appreciate that they don't know, they acknowledge that this is a gap in their knowledge. They're open to using and recommending therapies that have good evidence, but they don't really know, and that's why I spend a lot of my time actually educating doctors on the subject. Because even if they hate them or love them, and we have a wide variety in medicine, some doctors think they're great, a lot think they're awful, all doctors need to know. Because all patients, or a lot of patients, are coming to the doctor and saying, hey, I want something natural, or what do you think of this therapy? So it's good. Doctors are increasing their knowledge, which is really good.
And they're becoming a bit more open to those questions from the patients rather than just shunning them away?
They've got no choice. And in fact, the patients often know more than they do, because they've read articles, they've been on the internet, etc. So you have the embarrassing situation where they ask a doctor about a therapy and they can't even comment on it. So they want to know more, even if it's just to answer questions. But yeah, doctors are pretty sceptical, and before they recommend a treatment, they want to know it works, and that's very reasonable for traditional and complementary. So what I'm doing is saying, look, these are the complementary ones that have the research, so you can have the confidence to recommend them to your patients.
You held a public forum the other weekend. How did the public receive this talk that you gave?
Look, it was a phenomenal response. We had over 100 ladies with breast cancer and their partners, and a lot of local doctors and breast surgeons as well. And this is almost becoming my main job now. I get asked to do talks all the time, and I enjoy it. And what we tend to do is have a brief talk and just open it up to questions. There's so many questions. We could go on all day with all the questions we get. So I'm now up to around 50 talks a year. And this was a particularly good, positive meeting in Tauranga. Lots of really good questions, got some really good feedback, and hopefully I'm helping people in this unfortunate situation with some difficult choices to make. I'm just trying to guide them towards the better therapies out there, because I think it's really hard for them. No offence, but they're not trained. They're not trained to look in the medical research literature. Don't have access to it, and they can only go off things like the internet and the media reports. And no offence to the media, but some of the information out there is not very accurate at all. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Now, do these therapies actually work, or is it just another form of hope for cancer sufferers?
Well, in terms of hope, it's interesting. Being positive and optimistic when you have a serious diagnosis is important. We know that optimistic people do better. Can't explain it, but they just do. But what's bad is false hope. So if you're not going to be cured from your cancer, if it is going to be fatal, it's best not to believe that you're going to be cured by some miracle potion. So optimism, but not false hope. Now, obviously we haven't got time to go into all the therapies, but there are 3 or 4 dozen out there that I think can be helpful. They're not going to cure a person, absolutely not, but they can really help with symptoms and quality of life. And that's really good to know.
To find out more about Shaun's research, head to flavours.me/Shaun Holt.